Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Angie Barker Jackson, and I am the Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at Berkeley School of Theology. We are delighted you have joined today's First Friday Lunch and Learn session. Welcome to February and welcome to Black History Month. If you haven't already, we invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. And no matter where you are or what time it is for you, feel free to enjoy your lunch or a snack during this time. That's, of course, why we call it Lunch and Learn. This series is sponsored and planned by the Alumni Office at BST. Melissa LeBeuf, Assistant Director of Alumni and Donor Engagement, will be monitoring the chat today. So if you have questions during the presentation, be sure to drop them there, and we will address those questions at 12:40. Thanks, Melissa, for all that you do. These Lunch and Learns have been designed with three purposes in mind: learning, connecting, and being. Each month features a different topic and a new guest. Our hope is that the topics will stretch and challenge our minds, that we will connect and reconnect with others in the BST network, and that this will be a space of radical belonging. Thank you for joining us on this first Friday of February 2026. Today's presentation will surely ground us in not only Black History Month, but also the Black church tradition. Our guest is Dr. Joseph Evans, a distinguished theologian, author, and academic leader currently serving BST as the J. Alfred Smith Senior Endowed Chair of Theology in the Public Square and as one of our professors of homiletics. In addition to his faculty role, Dr. Evans is the inaugural director of the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Restorative Justice at BST. His work focuses on decolonizing Eurocentric theology and developing antithesis rhetoric to craft prophetic sermons that address social and economic intersections. Dr. Evans came to BST 3 years ago with a long history of leadership in both theological education and pastoral ministry. Prior to coming here, he served as the dean of the Morehouse School of Religion at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta. He has over 15 years of pastoral experience, where he served as senior pastor at Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., and at First Baptist Church in Huntington, West Virginia. He has also taught as adjunct instructor of homiletics at the Divinity School at Howard University and Wesley Theological Seminary. His educational pedigree includes degrees from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, as well as the West Virginia Institute of Technology. Dr. Evans is a prolific author known for his work on sacred rhetoric and justice. Some of his books include The Polished King, Living Words of Martin Luther King Jr., The Art of Eloquence, The Sacred Rhetoric of Gardner C. Taylor, Reconciliation and Reparation, Preaching Economic Justice, and Lifting the Veil Over Eurocentrism, the Du Boisian Hermeneutic of Double Consciousness. Welcome, Dr. Evans. We are eager to hear what you have to say today. And because you have asked me to, I will break in and let you know when it's 12:30 so that you can wrap up and get prepared for the Q&A time. Dr. Evans, the microphone is yours.
Well, thank you so much. Let me do some of the homework you told me to do. Slideshow.
Left side from the beginning. You got it.
Do I have to stop share to do that?
Nope, you're good. Just move on over there to the left corner where it says from beginning under the file.
Gotcha.
You got it?
Got
You
it.
got it.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you. Let me thank Dr. Angie and the Institutional Advancement team. I can't do these things without people helping me to do it. And so I want to thank them for that. I also want to recognize our alumni, as well as our students and faculty, friends from around the country, and people right here in the East Bay from the Hudson Cafe. If you haven't been to the Hudson Cafe, where I hang out with some of my friends, well, you probably haven't had the best cup of coffee in the Berkeley area. So thank you so very much for being here. I spent the time giving you opportunity to look at that image. That image is of a person who lived most of his life as a slave. This image was introduced to me as early as 9 or 10 years of age, as many African American kids across the country would have seen this same image. In addition to seeing this image, it really gives you and I an opportunity to think of social location and how one sees the world, how one interprets the world. So I'll stop there. By the way, Ken Burns made great use of this particular image in his Civil War series for PBS. If you haven't seen it, I suggest that you take note of it. He clearly understood the symbolism for this image, or this image represents to other people. This is the second image that I and others would have known very well as a kid. This is an image of people, and you can see the children in the foreground, predominantly men. I see no women in this particular photo, but they're all attending a public lynching. And I must tell you that African Americans were introduced to this type of behavior very early because that was a part of our reality, how to adjust to dominating cultures, mythologies, rituals, and even traditions that oftentimes became a part of their religion. And so the psychological warfare of I would call it African American, even African cosmology, the double consciousness, the uncertainty of who to trust and who not to trust, becomes a very very early on in our existence. And so you see the existential experiences, the shared view, stories past told, and of course, stories that are present. I am hoping that you will see that we're moving toward a worldview that becomes a theological worldview that informs how the Black church, and I use that definite article, and perhaps you could say the authentic Black church, because I want to try to help us understand what that is. So whether it is in a classroom, whether it is at a grandparent's knee, the past stories of how we came to this country and how they sojourned, and we were to be aware of how we would have to face the future, and the present and the future. I hope these images help you and I to further understand, again, what shapes an African American cosmology, African American worldview, and these existential experiences. This is Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells captured everything I just showed you in those slides. Ida B. Wells is a parent of the Black church experience. Ida B. Wells was a prophet without a pulpit, but clearly helped shape a narrative that led to, well, what we'll see shortly. Ida B. Wells was an extremely gifted journalist and writer, and she was so gifted and so effective in her writing skills. Her life was threatened numerous times, and she literally had to flee the southern states because she inflamed people's and decentered mythologies with truth. And because she did that, she is one of the most respected and, if I may say, famous Black women in the history of African American culture in this country. So we love Ida B. Wells. Growing up in the Black church, you would see pictures of Ida B. Wells on the wall, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and a couple of others that I'll have in this presentation. So the authentic Black church, which I'm going to get to, is primarily egalitarian. I said the authentic Black church, by the way, and I want to talk about that. So this is Dark Water, the voices from within the veil. And you can see there is a title there. And by the way, I have my copy just right here. I don't have, I always have this copy always near me, and I read it a lot. This book was actually essays that Dr. W. Du Bois had written. He had already written The Souls of Black Folk, but this book came in 1903, he published The Souls of Black Folk. Notice I said souls, plural, of Black folk, not the soul of Black folk. Du Bois wanted to give space for the double consciousness and the struggle for identity in these souls of Black folk. But this book, Dark Water, The Voices from Within the Veil, begins to shape the Black church tradition for us. There's a wonderful essay called The Servant in the House, Jesus Christ in Texas. Boyce tells this marvelous story about African Americans being lynched in the South, but compares it to the very lynching of Jesus of Nazareth at Golgotha. So we see the shape of Black theology, liberation theology taking place. So if we look at this very quickly, we'll see that this essay is to dramatize that the Black bodies in the American South and the Midwest were occurrences. They were accepted behavior. And the Black church then came as a response to the failure of the Reconstruction era and its policies, often referred to as the Black Reconstruction era. So the Black church tradition rightly seeks the democratic tradition, namely justice and equality. So if you really want to kind of understand what the authentic Black church is, it grew out of resistance to imperial hegemonic cultural power and the failure of white religion to keep its word. So the Black church tradition, therefore, seeks the democratic tradition, namely justice and equality. So here's kind of breakdown. The Black church is a philosophical worldview, informs the democratic tradition. I can't see what it says. It might say inform the democratic tradition. But Micah 6 and 8 comes to mind. I think it's also important to highlight that the African American democratic tradition is informed more from the Hebrew tradition than it is the Greek tradition. Oftentimes, we hear a lot about the Greek tradition in democracy. I would suggest to you and others that the democratic tradition really didn't start with, let's say if it did start with the Greek tradition, it was definitely demarcated in a different way with the Hebrew tradition. The prophets oftentimes were siding with the oppressed, looking for ways to be more inclusive, to trying to expand what eventually would be described as the kingdom of God, particularly in the New Testament. But we could even go so far as to say that the democratic tradition is maybe a secular way to talk about the kingdom of God. And if those who are not familiar with the Hebrew Bible, Micah 6 and 8, depending on the translation, but it may say something like this: do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. That's powerful. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Justice, mercy here would be equality. Walking humbly with your God would be the democratic tradition. So we see the intersection between religion and democracy, which I would call a democratic theology. I hope I'm right because I've spent a lot of time writing a new book about it. So hopefully it's right. But I think it is. And we will see that intersection, or I might say that they are interdependent. And by interdependency, there's a shared democratic vision, a democratic ideal. Mine is the justice and equality. If you get justice and equality right, there's a lot of isms that should go away. If we can eradicate racism and abolish poverty, I think a lot of isms will go away. I think the worldview, the democratic tradition for the Black church, as I said, is race, economics, and politics. But I think if that construct was being developed now, as Du Bois did earlier, I think gender would be added. And so I had it because I like the race, economics, and politics, but I add gender because I think that frontier needs our attention, um, not only in the pulpits, but also in the public square, which leads to the last one, social structures. The Black church is responsible to inspire public debates. That is the public square. So the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Restorative Justice focuses a great deal on the public square. But really, we also are trying to influence private and institutional spheres. I don't have time to go into that, but I think many of you will know the difference. Public debate creates or shares a democratic vision, builds a process, well, decides what the ideals are. Many of you probably should be maybe considering writing questions about, well, what are some of those ideals today? What did John Dewey, where did he leave off on his democratic ideal and his pragmatism? How do we do that? But whatever the case is, then we have to move to private and institutional spheres to democratic activism to change much of what we see in the society today that is obviously beyond immoral in my view. I think we're now dealing with amoral leaders. I'm talking about political leaders, to be honest, to be exact. Okay, so the early adopters of the Black church tradition, or what you and I would learn later, maybe not today, but the Black social gospel movement, were not just pulpiteers. For example, Dr. John Hope was the first African-American president of Morehouse College. He would have been considered um, a leader in the Black church tradition or the Black social gospel movement. And in 1906, he became the first African-American president of Morehouse College and was very close to Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois and others. The second person is Miss Jessie Fawcett, and she was the literary editor of the Crisis magazine of the NAACP. She once wrote a letter to Dr. Du Bois, and I think Dr. Dowdy is on here, and he knows this far better than I, because of University of Massachusetts, Amherst, University of Massachusetts, Amherst, where we can get to many of the documents that Dr. Du Bois and his function in creating what we would now call a Black liberation theology. But Black liberation theology, and I think I can get to that in a moment, had people who were Christians but were not, and frankly, people who were non-Christians, but had a justice motif was their motivation for being involved. I should stop here and tell you before I say just a little more about Jessie Fawcett. The Black church tradition is a democratic movement. It's a movement. Christianity works best when it's a movement. When it is stale and stagnant, it becomes reactionary and, in our time, something that looks closer to neo-fascism. But having said that, Jessie Fawcett was a student. She went on to the University of Pennsylvania to get her master's degree, but in her undergraduate years, she had read Souls, or The Souls of Black Folk, and she wrote Dr. Du Bois and said some of the most interesting things to him with this insight of such a young person at the time. And I was looking for my David Levering Lewis books. I was going to look up a direct quote in the very first volume. I did forgot. I'd actually took that over to my house because I'm writing something out of that, and I should have brought it back to my office. But you can look it up. But she was also probably the midwife or parent of the Harlem Renaissance movement, that lady. And that connects the Harlem Renaissance literary arts movement and aesthetic to the aesthetic of the Black church tradition. That's pretty neat, I think. But she, along with others, she doesn't get the credit she deserves, and we're going to correct that. But she was clearly out front in the Harlem Renaissance movement. But the Harlem Renaissance movement often looked at a literary movement, looked at a secular movement, but philosophically, it was in line with the Black social gospel movement or the authentic Black church movement. A lot of information, right? So it is our Black History Month, and the Credo for Liberation, weaving Black History Month in the Black church tradition. I gave you a lot of background, so let's talk about what the Credo is in the last few minutes that we have. The Credo, Credo to the legatees of the Black church tradition. We actually wrote that. And, here's a copy of what came out a year ago on January 1 in 2025. And it has legs. It's still very popular and now becoming a part of curriculum in schools across the country. The Credo was inspired by Du Bois's Darkwater. He has he begins this book in Darkwater with his own credo that we believe, at least I believe, is a postscript, was actually a part of um, informed by, I think it was informed by the Nicene Creed. Others say it's the Apostles' Creed. I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. But what is important is that Du Bois understood theologically the significance of these credos. I think I should also say for those who are in the Free Church, who are non-creedal people, we don't take it that far, and certainly Du Bois did not. Um, we don't have a lot of space in the African American community to be too tied to European doctrinal issues and fights and wars. That's not the kind of we can't do that. We're almost always in a survivalist and existential mode. This is probably a more artistic approach to what we believe as a people. And if you read this in Darkwater, you'll see it's got all the language of the credo. He's very clever at how to use religious language, whether referentially or otherwise, but or deferentially. But the fact of the matter is, Du Bois understands, I believe in God who made one blood all nations, that on the earth do dwell. I believe that all men and women, black and brown, white and brothers and sisters, vary through time and opportunity in form and gift and feature, but differing in no essential particular, and alike in soul and the possibility of infinite development. And so Du Bois is using that as a point of departure to help us understand that this is a rhetorical framework on how to create not only a Black theology, but we use that also in our credo to the legatees of the Black church to give us a shape for how to bring together different religious traditions. And by that, I mean not only denominational differences, but even religionist for people who share the justice and equality motifs. And I didn't do that by myself. There were several people that helped us do that. And there was a lot of debate about what actually went into the final document. There it is, the Nicene Creed. We believe in one God, the Father, Theos, Almighty, making of heaven and earth and all things visible and invisible, and the one Kyrios Jesus Christos, the only Son of Ektheos, God, begotten the Father, Theos, so forth and so on. So this seems to be the correct model for what Du Bois decided to do um, from an artistic point of departure. There's a picture of our credo that was actually released on January 2025, and it was a response to Mr. Trump's Project 2025. And I would urge everyone to read Project 2025. Mr. Trump's name does not appear in our credo. We don't speak truth to power anymore. We speak truth against power. We use a mute theory. We're not going to give him any oxygen to try to talk to us because we're beyond that now. So Project 2025 parallels Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, My Struggle or My Struggles, which instigates the formation of fascist Nazi Germany politics and policies today. Project 2025 encourages tax policies that would decimate human families economically, the middle and working classes. That's just an example of what we focused on. But if you and I are paying attention to what he's doing, he's clearly following Nazi Germany's model, Mein Kampf, which parallels Project 2025. Um,
Dr.
Project,
Evans, I'm going to jump in right now before you start this slide to give you
Mhm.
that time warning that you asked me about. So we're
Great.
coming on to 12:30, so 10, 12 minutes,
Okay,
and then we
okay,
want to open for some Q&A.
gotcha. In fact, I'm almost through. So that's good. So I want you to know you need to be aware of the Heritage Foundation in Washington was founded at response to civil rights and has been very much committed to draconian, autocratic, dictatorial, hegemonic policies ever since. And they really helped put together a cadre of conservatives, business people to bring about the Project 2025. Project 2025 now has a curriculum. That is, you can literally teach this in Sunday school class. Thank you, Dr. Valerie Miles Tribble, who is a pedagogist, and Charlotte Williams, a person I'm trying to get in one of our programs here over at Allen Temple, really helped us do this. They had other people working with them. Dr. Otis Moss III, who is a very prominent preacher these days in many circles, has taken this credo and has created it into much of what he's doing in his church. Um, these are links you can click. I wish I had time and maybe I can do it. I'll put it in the chat for you. And I end with this. You see this image again? The man's name was his name was Peter, formerly known as Gordon. And so we want to give him his name. He had a name. Okay. And then finally, thank you. And I'm now prepared to listen to your questions and answers.
Melissa's going, or Melissa and I have been reading some questions that have been coming. I know for sure, Dr. Evans, that I have one that I will pose for you, but I hope others are thinking and will be ready to engage you in some dialogue as well. So this question says, in addition to Dr. Hope at Morehouse, what has been the relationship of the Black church to what we now call HBCUs or historically Black colleges?
Well, without the Black churches, there probably wouldn't be any HBCUs. Nearly all of them were founded by a Black church. So if we stay in Atlanta, for example, Friendship Baptist Church, which is in the AUC or the Atlanta University Center, uh, both Spelman and Morehouse. were either founded or housed in the original church for a number of years. But it's very hard to separate education from the Black church experience. Um, I hope that answers your question. I want to give others opportunity to ask questions. I would just say one other thing to that. Um, I knew people in Atlanta who were students in the AUC, and when they were students, they actually knew John Rockefeller. These people are in the mid '90s, and they met John Rockefeller, who was walking around the campus with Laura Spelman Rockefeller, and they were just mingling among the students, asking them questions. And her father was a professor on campus, the lady I'm thinking about. So she kind of had a tip that they were on campus, but she saw them. And of course, you know that Laura Spelman was an American Baptist. John Rockefeller was a devout American Baptist. And they were responsible not only for a lot of HBCUs, but including our school as well. They gave funds to us here at Berkeley School of Theology. Other questions?
Looks like Dr. Brenneman's raising his hand. Dr. Brenneman, I'm going to go ahead and invite you to unmute and ask your question since we have a good amount of time here.
Okay. So you sort of described for us the rhetoric used by Dr. Du Bois that literally described, if not inspired, the first Reconstruction period, what I and others and you and author Fomer and others have described as probably the only time in American history to date that we were closest to our ideals, that 10-year period, and to which we want to go back to and or go forward to be inspired by. And most of us have never even learned of that period in our history books or Du Bois' description of that period or his inspiration for that in large measure as it relates to democracy and the country's ideals. And then how do you relate that to this new credo? You've described it structurally, and I'm picking up on the power of rhetoric to describe things that we hope for. And what's your hope for this new credo in its role in describing what's possible that that might be overlooked by some, but maybe not 50 years from now. When Du Bois was overlooked potentially, that his description was so. Okay, I've said enough. I'm just wondering, please connect this a little bit more, Du Bois' credo and this new credo, in terms of its idealism, its rhetorical power, its possibility for describing a new democratic rule.
That's a good question. And I think it would lack integrity to say I know. I can say that it's in its embryonic stage in respect to how others will take it and develop it, critique it, and make it better. I don't think we actually sat down and wrote something that's timeless. It was a response to what we felt, and well, I think most people felt at the time that the nation had gone backward. Now, to your point about the Reconstruction, I do think we have an opportunity as a community to bring about some of the ideals of the Reconstruction that obviously stopped because of Southerners and, of course, Andrew Johnson being elected. I don't know what deals he made, or they may have just been his own understanding of the country. We lost a lot. And as I said, the Black church was a response to the failure of the Reconstruction. If I may, just for a moment, very quickly, give you an idea. Uh, February 1926, Dr. Carter G. Woodson introduces Black History Week. Watch this. In 1976, uh, President Gerald Ford issued a proclamation that said all Americans in all states and territories encouraged to embrace and celebrate Black History Month. But in 1986, it became law, which forced Ronald Reagan to write a presidential proclamation. And in his proclamation, he said the observation of Black History Month. He didn't tell them to observe it. Clever writing. But when you think about that, it took 60 years from 1926 to 1986 to actually go from a week to a month. And people don't believe there's systemic and systematic racism. I got some land to sell you, and it's cheap. We can see that the Reconstruction did not occur in a straight line. But I hope that we will be on our way toward fulfilling some of its aspirations as we speak. But I can't say that what we wrote here is, I think it's pretty good actually, but we had a lot of help and we had to get it out really quickly. And we had a lot of people debating it. And we came, frankly, with some compromises. There were things I actually wanted was a little further radicalized than some other people could live with. And so it didn't make it into the final draft. But hopefully we will improve them.
Dr. Evans, you just gave us what might be a great segue into another question that we just received. And this question comes from the Reverend Jim Hopkins. And he says, you're talking about the credo that's now 1 year old. It just had its birthday, which is part of the reason why I know we wanted to talk about it today and so forth. Would you revise it in any way in light of the events of the past year? He asked.
Yes, I would get my
Say more about that, please.
I would get my original ideas in it that I didn't get it. I felt, to be very honest with you, some of the language around the Palestinian conflict in Israel, things that I believe that should have been said, were not said. We had some people who had a different perspective of what it meant to support Israel than I do. My view is theologically, you support Israel, but you're really supporting quote unquote Jewish people. I'm not certain that we're bound to support a state any more than my state that engages in genocide of a people. And so I wanted more exact language that stated that we condemn the state of Israel and its genocide on a people group. And there were people a year ago that thought that was they wanted more nuance. And I felt that that was not appropriate because I asked, and I'll tell you how I went about it. I said, well, how many of you know some of our evangelical brothers and sisters they tell us a lot about Israel, but they don't tell us they're praying for Christians in Palestine. It's as though they don't even know there are Christians in Palestine. How can you? It's just inconsistent. And so we kind of didn't get what I wanted, but I've written several articles about it since. I still got my view out. But I would like to see that as a revision. I think we probably should spend more time talking about building coalitions because I think, I don't want to speak for everybody who was doing this. Let me just read something, a belief statement here. We believe that, this is on page 12. We believe that many in the white evangelical church have committed irrefutable political, economic, and religious idolatry. White evangelicals are drunk on the religion of white Christian nationalism, which does not find its footing in the gospel of Jesus of Nazareth, which is to proclaim good news to the poor, parenthetically, the oppressed and the socio-marginalized. So that's kind of the language that appears in here, but we probably could go back and revise it and make its teeth stronger. And I think a year later, we probably could maybe have been a little broader in how we build coalitions with people who are already on the team. But I think at that moment, we did not feel that way because, and can I be honest with you? It wasn't Black folks who elected Donald Trump to be president. We're like, good Lord, then who's on our side? I mean, who are these people who are voting for this guy? So how do we trust their religion?
Mm.
I mean, you can't tell me you love Jesus and vote for a guy who hates, I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna say hates women. Who hates women? I have to laugh about it so I won't cry.
There are a couple more questions now, Dr. Evans. We have a short, maybe straightforward one. I'm going to pose both of them to you, and then I'm just going to invite you to speak to both of them instead of interrupting. So we have this short question asking you if you will contrast Reconstruction between then and now. So there's that. If you can let that bubble around a little bit, and then Dr. Derek has written a really thoughtful question and says, building on Du Bois' argument, Black Reconstruction, that Reconstruction was the most radical democratic experiment in American history, and that its failure required violence, myth-making, and moral retreat to sustain white supremacy. How do you understand the Black church's role today as a moral and theological counter to authoritarian impulses, especially when inhumane behavior is normalized through law, policy, or public rhetoric rather than overt force? So you got a couple questions here, and they're both in the chat. If you want a visual for them, you can see them in the chat.
Yeah, I will. I wanted to, pardon me, I'm turning around because I was trying to find a couple books that Gary Dorian wrote, but I want to write that in the chat. So folks who want to understand or have a really good, I'm just going to write his name. He's written like really three good books on the Reconstruction period, and he's in Ephesus at Union Theological Seminary in New York. And I'm just going to put UTS. Anything he's written, I suggest that you read it. He did that come up? Why is that not coming in? Okay, I see. Let me try to shift this so all can get it.
While you're doing that, also, I'll say we had another question about how to get a hold of the credo. And so I did drop a link in the chat, both the original credo itself, as well as the curriculum for use in church settings like small groups, Sunday school, et cetera, et cetera. Both of those are available as PDF downloads on the BST website. So we have them for you. I just put the credo in the chat, and we've already dropped the curriculum once today, but I can drop it again because we've got a lot going on in the chat and you may have missed it. So we'll drop those for you all, and you can have access to those, download them and use them. So Dr. Evans, I know you're working on addressing Dr. Derek's question. He's got his hand up. So Derek, you might as well unmute yourself.
Hello. So I think the short version of the question is, how does the church in general, but the Black church specifically here, continue the historic work of naming domination as sin, like maximum wrong, as a not simply as politics, and a build off of the many iterations of what feels like progress, and then the ebb and flow of rights and liberties and protections and safety, and to say to the Black church where the grandchildren are fighting the same fight, great grandchildren, what are we going to do different? How do we move differently in the same structural constraints? And it just, yeah, that's it. I hope that helps as far as what I was hoping you'd riff with.
Well, let me also thank you, Dr. Laura Jean Torgerson, Gary Dorian. She's put it in there for me, and I suspect, and I hope that all of you will go and read those books. They're just really good stuff. I use it a lot in my own work. He has offered us a very detailed understanding of what Reconstruction looked like in the beginning and what it may look like now. We tried to make it look different, haven't we? We call those people like, I don't know, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, various others who have tried to disrupt the hegemonic practices and help us to see the world from the lens of the oppressed. Now, to your point, I don't want to be too heady. I want to try to answer it as we have two options. The Black church can say, we're not going to bail out white America again. We're done. We've tried too many times and we haven't really paid attention. That's one answer. The problem with that, it becomes very nihilistic and fatalist if we do that. Although there are a lot of African Americans who are tired of bailing out capitalism, materialism, greed, envy, pride, prejudice, and other things and emotions we can talk about. The other thing we have to decide, so if we don't participate and help, then everybody is going to go down. Now, having said that, I don't think there are many African Americans that thinks that not whites in America, that's a little different than white America. Whites in America, I don't put in the white America thing. There are a lot of whites in America who ain't trying to be a part of white America. So I want to make that clear to everybody who's listening. Sometimes that has to be said so that people understand that we understand the difference and we know you understand the difference. But whites in America have to put white America in check. We can't do it by ourselves, and I don't think that's what we should do. On the other hand, it's kind of like the Jonah story, right? Black America sent to Nineveh again to warn the Ninevites. And like Jonah, there are a lot of Black folk who don't want to warn the Ninevites again, right? Because it's just the rain is saving and the same thing happens again. Lastly, this is a little more heady. You heard me say I don't think African American church, or as I define the Black church with the Du Boisian people, the Jesse Fawcett people, some of the folks ain't sitting in your pews every Sunday, but they have philosophically the understanding of the movement. And I would say this, I don't think we need to talk about truth to power, the infinitive, excuse me, of the power somehow wiggling in to remain the subject. I think we now speak truth against power. We have to talk among ourselves and not spend so much time talking to people who are not listening to us. So we don't need a counter narrative now. We need to literally create a new narrative. Black folks are good at a counter narrative. We're great at that. But I think we don't need a counter narrative now. We need to write a new narrative with new coalitions, with people who believe in justice and equality, that if we do justice and equality right, we're going to do inclusion right, we're going to do diversity right, and we're going to do equity right. I think that's the way forward.
That seems like maybe a good word to be the last word. We need a new narrative to build new coalitions
New
so that we
narrative.
can do justice right and equality right and inclusion right. Thank you, Dr. Joseph Evans,
Thank you.
for introducing us or helping us deepen our awareness of the Black Church, Black History Month, and also for giving us some familiarity with this now 1-year-old credo, and for sharing it with us so that we might have a copy for ourselves, so that we might understand better and work with you and others to craft this new narrative and new vision. We appreciate you being here today, sharing your scholarship and your willingness to answer our questions and dialogue with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before we log off today, of course, we have just a few announcements for you all. And thank you for showing Dr. Evans all of this love and appreciation. I love those emoji reactions. They're so much fun. If you know someone, a friend, a colleague, someone in your church who's exploring theological education or their own call to ministry, maybe someone who's wrestling with these very things that Dr. Evans was talking about, who has a passion for justice, for equality, who wants to be part of a new coalition, please invite them to join our admissions webinars. We have them monthly, and the next one is Tuesday, February 10th. It will feature our Dean and Vice President of Academics, Reverend Dr. Leanne Snow-Flesher, who is in this meeting today. She will lead an introduction to our programs and take questions. It's a great way for the people in your life to explore how a BST education might help them answer the calling that's on their life. The registration for that session is in the chat, and we invite you to share that with the people in your network. Our next First Friday Lunch and Learn will be on March 6th, and it will feature BST's New Testament professor, Dr. Laura Jean Torgerson, who's also in this session today. And she'll be in conversation with her own pastor, the Reverend Clarence Johnson, and they will dialogue around the idea that we've been here before, resonances with the civil rights movement. So we hope that you will make plans to join us, and you may register through the link that has been put in the chat. And finally, I'd like to invite you to our winter virtual alumni gathering, BST Alumni Building Sanctuary, on February 26th from 4 to 6 p.m. on Zoom. In the first hour, we'll be honoring alumni, celebrating graduation anniversary milestones and hearing. And then in the second hour, we'll hear from some select alumni about how they are building sanctuary in their communities. We hope you'll register, and you can find more details through the link that's being dropped in the chat. Thank you again all for participating with us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everyone.